Governor Burgum, welcome to Meet the Press.
Chuck, great to be here, and special gratitude from all of us in North Dakota for you and your team traveling all the way to Fargo.
We love being here. So let me start. Every write-up of your candidacy and the focus that you put on your presidential, on the issues you want to focus on, and what you say is that what the silent majority cares about. Every analyst seems to end their analysis of your campaign with, boy, this is a campaign that would make a lot more sense in the 1990s or in the Mitt Romney era of the Republican Party. What say you to that?
Well, first of all, I would describe them not as silent but exhausted. There's a broad spectrum of Americans that are really frustrated with the discourse that's happening at the edge. And part of the reason they're frustrated is because there aren't candidates, there aren't choices on the ballot to talk about the things that matter to them. And when the First Lady and I are in New Hampshire, in Iowa, or here in North Dakota, where we've been leading the last 6.5 years, the things that people are concerned about, price of food on the table, the price of gas at the pump, and you wouldn't think that in North Dakota maybe that national security would be front of mind, but whether it's Chinese spy balloons, whether it's the price of soybeans and tariffs, or whether it's China building spy bases, these three things, economy, energy policy and national security are the things that people really care about, and they touch every American. And they don't just touch Republicans, they touch independents, they touch Democrats. If we can unleash the best of America, if we can get our economy sprinting instead of crawling, that lifts the boat for everybody. We know that. That's always been. And when we are in a Cold War in China, we just won't admit it. But the way you work your way through a Cold War is you win it economically.
Your message makes a lot of sense for the middle of the electorate. But you're having to win a Republican nomination first. And you have firsthand experience. You have a legislature that is not focused on the issues you're focused on, but they're focused on all these cultural issues that the primary electorate seems to be focused on. So how do you talk the Republican primary voters into your vision?
Well, I think we know a little bit about winning Republican primaries because we've won 2 here in North Dakota in a state that is...
it's an open primary state. So
yep.
You've had independent. You can have... in most of these Republican primary contests, independent, other than New Hampshire, independents and Democrats don't get to participate.
And New Hampshire is a very important state. So it is an opportunity here, again, for this exhausted majority to say, look, there's so many people in our country that don't want to rerun at the presidential race of what we had in 2020. I think the numbers are through the roof that people would like to have other choices. The way you end up with different choices is people have to get engaged in primary elections. And so part of our invitation is for people to, learn more about us. Go to dougburgum.com. If this is a message that you want to hear about, if you want to hear this voice on the debate stage, and if you want to have a chance to vote for someone for president as opposed to cast a vote, which is I'm voting against the other one, which a lot of people will tell you the last 2 elections, they've been voting against the other person. This is a chance to reverse that. And so it's up to the voters. It's not up to the pundits.
Let me
it's
ask
up
you
to
this:
the voters.
How do you explain Donald Trump's hold on the GOP?
Well, I would leave that. There's a whole industry that talks incessantly, nonstop about these kinds of questions.
But you're running to lead this party, and in order for you to become the leader of this party, you've got to understand why the current leader has this hold on constituents that you want to lead. What's your diagnosis?
Well, here in North Dakota, people that voted for Donald Trump also voted for us. And so we know a lot about Donald Trump voters. But we also know that Republican primary voters, they want to win in 2024. And how we're going to win is we will present ourselves when we get to next January, next February, when the voting starts, is that we have the best chance of beating Joe Biden. That's who the Republicans are going to nominate, the person that has the best chance to win, because Republicans understand that he's not just need a course correction, but wrong on the economy, wrong on energy policy, and wrong on national security. And there's so many examples of this. I mean, it's here we've had this energy crisis that's happened just during the last couple of years, and we've got the Biden administration going to our adversaries, asking them to produce more energy, not producing it here. If you care about the environment, you'd want to have every ounce of energy produced in the United States. If you want to have stable electrical grid, because we want to have manufacturing back in the United States, even if you say, hey, we want to have, and where it's appropriate, have electric vehicles, we can't be shutting down electrical baseload electricity. You can't have renewable electricity and not have baseload.
You're trying to engage in a policy debate. I just come back to the Republican primary electorate is not engaging in this. Donald Trump is not out there talking about the energy grid. Donald Trump's out there talking about the weaponization of law enforcement. Is this what Republican primary voters are responding? Why are they responding to that and not your argument?
Well, Chuck, it's responding now. We've been in this race just over 3 weeks. I just would say, stay tuned and see where we're going to be next January and February. We know that the issues that matter most, the most number of Americans at the end, when people end up voting, they vote about pocketbook issues. And you can't, say to voters, hey, look, you should feel better about the inflation we have this year because it's half of last year. That's like telling someone, hey, your pay cut this year is going to be less than the one last year. Feel good about it. And so we know that these issues are affecting people, and I think that people also need to know about Catherine and I. They need to know that we care deeply about the real issues that matter to people. We don't care about, trying to be more angry than other candidates. We care about actually solving real problems that affect real people every day.
All right, let's start with a little bit about yourself and your philosophy. Just how much should character count when it comes to running for office?
It should count enormously, particularly when you're talking about the jobs of being a governor or being a president, because the executive branch, different from the other branches, but specifically legislative, if you're a legislator, you put on your jersey, you fight for your side, you vote oftentimes along party lines. If you don't vote with a party, you vote at your peril. The President of the United States, as this balancing third branch, is the one that's supposed to unite people. It's supposed to bring people together, supposed to paint a vision about a powerful, positive future. And somehow we've gone astray on that, where the presidency has also become hyper-partisan, no matter which party is in office.
So sounds like you're saying you thought Donald Trump divided America when he was president.
I think it started before that, the era of celebrity presidents. It started before he was president, but I'm just saying, if we're running in a Burgum presidency, we're going to be addressing issues that touch everyone. Because I've learned this in North Dakota. Even when we were campaigning in North Dakota, we went to the 5 tribal nations with whom we share geography. And we were down 69-10 in the polls. And one of the tribal leaders said to me, we think you're going to lose. And I said, why? They said, because we don't vote for Republicans, and you're spending a day here, and you've only got 5 months till the primary. So you must not be a very smart politician. I said, I'm not a politician. I'm a business leader. And when we're governor, we know that you, as an enrolled member of your tribe, also drive on North Dakota roads. You go to North Dakota schools. Yeah. You're involved in all that. So when the president has to serve everyone, and we can do that with smart Republican, fiscally conservative policies. We can do it with smart approaches to how we reignite our economy, how we establish our energy independence. Secretary Blinken went to China. I can't find a word in any of the reporting about that trip that he even talked about energy. China imports over 10 million barrels of oil a day, the largest importer. They are completely dependent on foreign sources for oil. We should have...
You want the United States to be an exporter of oil to China.
I want us to export energy to our allies as opposed to trying to buy it from our enemies. When we do that, that's how we stay...
Would you consider China an ally?
Right now, they're not. We're in a cold war with them, but we're pushing our allies towards them, and then even the sanctions that we've put on Russia, belatedly, Russia also a big oil producer. Great, we put sanctions on them. Guess what? Their oil can't sell on the world market. Victory? No, not victory. They're selling it at 20% off to China. I mean, the farmers that we've talked to in Iowa, they'd love to, tomorrow to be able to get up and get 20% off on their diesel before they head out into the field. So our policies are hurting America, helping China, and that's why national security actually touches every single American.
You ever lied in politics?
No.
That you know of? You don't believe you've ever lied?
No.
You'll be fact-checked on that, I'm sure, throughout the campaign.
I'm sure we will. I mean, it's a... but
you feel like you've always told the truth as you understood it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I was raised, and that's how I've gone forward. But I'm sure you're going to share something with me.
No, I'm not. It's not a gotcha. I'm literally... We are in a different era of politics where, that... You said character should count. Do you think Donald Trump's elevation to the presidency is proof that characters counted or not?
Well, I grew up in a town of 300 people, Arthur, North Dakota. In a town like that, and the business that my grandparents started was the grain elevator business. Right. And the grain elevator business, farmers bring you grain. Every truck they bring you take a sample. And in that sample, the way you take that sample, you can have, is it going to be 99% wheat and 10% or 1% chaff, or is it going to be 95% wheat and 5% chaff?
That's money in the pocket.
Every transaction, you build trust on every transaction. When I was about 6 years old, my dad walked me up in the driveway of the elevator, and he said, this is how we take the cleanest possible sample. This is how we get the highest amount of wheat and the least amount of chaff when we take that sample, because if we don't, this family is going to haul their grain 6 miles down the road to the other community. And so when we had the 100th anniversary celebration in the Arthur Gym of that company that my grandparents started, my brother read out of a general ledger journal from the 1920s, and the names of the people in the gym, the Olsons, the Stibbies, the Zimmermans, the Iwans, the Steffuses, all of the folks that were there in the audience were also in that journal from 100 years ago. I grew up learning that you have to build trust one transaction at a time, so you have generational trust. I took that actually was in all of the training that we had when we were starting with my dad was a World War II Navy veteran, died when I was a freshman in high school, and that was tough. My mom had to go back to work, widow with 3 kids. So I got to see that. But in my mid-20s, after having every job I'd ever had where you took a shower at the end of the day, working on the farm, working on the ranch, we're actually working as a chimney sweep to pay my way through college. When we started that company, one of the stories we told was the one I just shared with you, that we have to build trust with our customers. We were building it in actual generational, generations every 20 years. The software industry, when it was getting going in the 1980s, people were burning their customers all the time because they'd here's the new technology, the old stuff doesn't work, pay us a bunch of money to upgrade. We said, no, you've got an older version, you can stay in that older version as long as you want to. We'll always support that. Our whole approach has always been about building trust, and that's why when Catherine and I walked out on the stage to announce on June 7th this year, and we thought there might be a couple hundred people. We ended up giving away 2,000 T-shirts that day. I walked out, there was kids from my high school class, there was customers that drove from around the country because they know that that we understand leadership, we know how to win, and we know how to execute and run an executive branch, and that we know that we've done all of that with the 4 values that we bring. They're right on the coin that I give from the governor's office, which is gratitude, curiosity, humility, and courage. Those are the things we lead with.
Would you ever do business with Donald Trump?
I don't think so.
Why?
I just think that it's important that you're judged by the company you keep, and
You just wouldn't do business with him?
No, I wouldn't.
What's someone who doesn't like you? What is someone who doesn't like you? What would they say about you? How would they criticize you? What's the worst thing you think somebody will say about your governorship, your time in politics? The fairest criticism.
The fairest criticism?
Yeah.
Maybe that we're, care too deeply, that we're too honest, that we're not political enough. I mean.
Sounds like a job. I know it sounds like the job interview answer.
But it is a little bit, because when we've tried to run as problem solvers, and so we don't really fit that mold of because you asked a question about how we'd be judged politically, and we're not that good at politics. I mean, in the sense of the way that it's being operated today, which is it's by subtraction.
Let me ask you this: what's something you think you could do better?
Here in the state of North Dakota?
Just in general in politics, in your current professional life.
Well, I'd say one area that I've care about a lot at the state level, because this is where the state should be the one that's actually driving education, and we have driven so much innovation, so much freedom, so much ability for our schools to innovate. And we've made progress, and we do that by convening. It doesn't matter whether it's education, whether it's the disease of addiction or mental health, whether it's building safe, healthy communities. There's soft power in leadership roles that exist at the president's level and the governor's level, which is convening. And so we've had for 6 years the Main Street Conference, Recovery Reinvented, led by the First Lady, who's been in recovery for 21 years and courageously using her voice and her face to help reduce the shame and stigma of addiction. That's literally saved lives. We have what we're doing on education, the Governor's Summit on innovation and education. It's innovation, not regulation, that's going to drive us forward. But you'd say, what can we do better? We've done a bunch of stuff, but we haven't been able to spread the innovation fast enough. Sometimes the wheels of government are too slow for someone who's been in the tech business, and we need to do more rapid adoption of new approaches in government at the state and the federal level.
I feel like you've signed a lot of bills that your legislature's put on your desk that you're not crazy about, but you've signed them anyway because you've made the argument they can override my veto. And on some things you do choose to stand up and veto. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, and we'll get into some details, what's your line of when you decide, well, I'm going to issue this veto, they're going to override me, but I want to make a statement, versus I don't like this bill, they're going to override me, so I'm going to let it go.
Well, every governor has got to deal with the legislature they're dealt with. In North Dakota, we've got a legislature that's 90-10, 90% Republican, 10% the other party, and some in the other party feel the same way the Republicans do. So it's a little bit like a uniparty in North Dakota.
Do you wish it were more politically diverse?
Well, I think that we want to make sure that all voices are heard. I think every state legislature is really slanted. Ours is like 80% men, 20% women. I think you might have different outcomes across all state legislators if you had more women involved. If we had more youth, the age, I mean, people say, hey, I'm young, I'm building a family, I can't do it. So the average age in North Dakota is 35. That's the average age in the legislature is older. North Dakota is 50-50 men and women. That's not our legislature. But that's the same across the whole country. But in terms of when a governor is trying to make a decision about veto or not veto, you're doing it in the context of hey, I want to pass the largest tax cut in the history of the state. We're also trying to we successfully closed the defined benefit pension plan. That's going to save North Dakotans billions.
What you're saying is you had a horse trade. But you had your priorities, and if you were going to get them to support your priorities, you were going to have to sort of suck it up and take some of their bills that you don't like.
Well, sometimes, particularly when the bills that you're less keen on are the ones that are being sponsored by the leaders that you need to get the other thing. But but in the end of the day, we always think about what's the impact on people and trying to make sure that we're driving through that and being smart about that.
So let's take abortion, the 6-week ban. A voter wants to know what your position is on abortion. I understand the law. It doesn't sound like this is the law you would have designed, but it's the law you signed. So what is your position on abortion?
Well, my position is that I support the Dobbs decision, and this is a decision that should be left to the states. And what's going to pass in North Dakota is not ever going to pass in California, New York, and wouldn't even pass in the state of Minnesota. And that's why I'm on the record saying that I would not sign a federal abortion ban.
You would not sign any federal legislation at all, whether it set the line at 24 weeks or 6 weeks?
No, I wouldn't, because it should be left to the states. Now, I think people can say Republicans are extreme. I personally think that having a late-term abortion, having an abortion one day before a child is born, I mean, that's abhorrent to me. Some states allow that. I think that's extreme, but states get to decide where they want to fit on that spectrum.
Where are you on this?
The states created the federal government, not the other way around.
Where are you on this?
Where I'm at is I believe in states' rights. And I believe that the President of the United States has got a defined set of things they're supposed to work on, and it's not every culture war topic. These are things that are left to the state. As president, things that you're supposed to focus on, things like the economy, like energy policy, which is completely tied to national security, and part of national security is the border, and these are things that the president right now, President Biden, has completely abdicated his responsibility on. Every state's become a border state. 110,000 overdose deaths in this country last year again. That's a statistic, but that's 330 a day. And we just in New Hampshire, we were, as you do, speaking to a small group of 20 people. We said, we're sure this touches everyone. And a couple came up to Catherine and I afterward and said, we lost our son to an overdose. That happens everywhere we go.
If your supermajority legislature had sent you an abortion bill that would have been similar to Minnesota's, and they had a veto, would you have signed the same? Whatever the veto-proof legislature had sent you an abortion, would you have signed it?
I think if it represented what the people of North Dakota do, and I think North Dakota is a very pro-life state, I think the legislature was representing what they thought the people of North Dakota
Although you seem to think that eventually this is going to be a referendum in the state rather than a piece of legislation, or at least early on you seem to indicate that you think it would be better off as a referendum.
Well, I think some of these issues, again, we're talking about cultural issues that are going to vary by the geography in the country. They're going to vary by the mix of the citizens. And if if some people say, hey, I don't like what my legislature did, people can do what they can do. Run for the legislature. If you don't like what, if you know, that's one option. Number two is get something referred. But that can happen on. That can happen on, you know, taxes. That can happen on property tax. It can happen on economic issues. This is part of the engagement that we have. And that dynamism at the state level, 50 platforms of innovation, it's okay if we have different answers to all this. If you want one size fits all, okay, great. You know, China's doing that. They got the CCP. They'll tell you what the one answer is for the whole country. We have won as a country on innovation. Innovation requires diversity and different approaches, 50 platforms of innovation.
Let me ask you this. You're a limited government guy, but you're legislating science in this case. You comfortable with that? You're legislating when a doctor can get involved and when somebody can get a medical intervention on their own decision. Are you comfortable with the government setting those limits?
Well, I'm comfortable with those battles happening at the state level, because if people don't like them, they've got an opportunity to get engaged and try to change that. At the federal level, it's not anything I'm going to be pushing, because I believe in freedom and liberty, and I believe that if we believe that as a party, then we have to think long and hard about, if we believe in freedom and liberty, then why are we trying to restrict certain things as a party? We should be the freedom and liberty party, and we should believe in the states' rights party, and you have to have some consistency around that.
I was just going to say, but there's a little bit of inconsistency in some of it. I look at the library bill that you basically are trying to protect librarians and not have them get treated like criminals, and at the same time, you allowed these transgender bills, which you yourself have said, what is it, 0.03% of North Dakotans identify as transgender? Is that a limited government approach?
I think, again, in the example of the librarians, again, there was a bill that was going to criminalize librarians, and we said, hey, you know, if there's a parent,
over what books are in the library?
Yeah, well, right? If a parent has a problem, they can talk to the librarian themselves. If that doesn't give them the right answer, they can go to the library board. The library board had a policy; they can do that. But to have a policy that would have affected, you know, 750 libraries and potentially criminalized librarians.
How is that? Why don't you have the same logic on these transgender bills?
Well,
sort of the same thing. Why is this even something the state law should be litigating?
Well, I think that's a question, and some states aren't litigating it. So some states are, and that's why I think, again, why as president we want to focus on the things that touch every American, and states are going to continue to have these battles, but these should not be things that the federal government is trying to sort out, because there will never be an answer. And guess who loves the most when we're talking about, you know, culture war issues in the U.S. And fanning the flames on social media? When maybe 40% of those social media accounts are bots, we get attacked every day in North Dakota by China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. They've all got people that come to work every day to do cyber attacks at the U.S. And sometimes they're attacking our cities, our universities, our tribes. Right. They're even trying to get into our K-12 school system to do that. But
I'm just trying to get around this contradiction. You seem to be completely uncomfortable with many of the things that your legislature has worked on, but you don't necessarily speak out about it.
Well, I'm comfortable that that these things are passing by vast supermajorities, and they believe that that's what they are hearing from their constituents, and that's what they are hearing from their constituents who are involved in the process.
But people outside of North Dakota, why shouldn't they ascribe your signing those bills as your positions?
Because I believe in states' rights, and I'm very clear that as president, I'm not running on issues that I think should be handled at the state level.
So you're not going to sign any abortion bills, you're not going to sign any transgender bills, you're going to stay out of every cultural issue if you get elected president?
Anytime that, when I was in the private sector and I had a chance to start from the tiniest startup, less than 10 people, build that into a 2,000-person company, I then had an opportunity to work at large global companies. Anytime you're the CEO, if you're spending time on something that can be done, in a, sales office, out on the front lines dealing with customers, you're not doing your job. You got to be looking to the future. We need a president that's focused on the challenges that we're being faced as a nation, not a president that's going to decide whether a book is in the right section or not in a library in a small town somewhere in America. That is and that's part of what's going wrong now. The reason why we've got issues with our economy, with our energy policy, with national security that are just raft is because we are somehow, through culturally, media, whatever, trapping the presidency or expecting them to weigh in on every single thing. It's not the place that a CEO should be spending their time. It's definitely not the place where the president should be spending their time.
Question on affirmative action. You praised the Supreme Court ruling. Curious what you thought of the exemption for service academies, and whether, because to me it seems like an odd thing. You're basically saying the government should prioritize diversity in the service academies for those that protect us and national security, but universities shouldn't. Does that make sense?
Well, one of the reasons that I supported the decision the Supreme Court made on affirmative action was because, the reaffirming the 14th Amendment, and it goes back to the late 1860s, right after the Civil War, that said everybody's got equal protection under the law. And one of the things that we know is that diversity can come in a lot of flavors. And in some of the places that have been most egregious in squashing any kind of diversity of thought, canceling speakers, restricting free speech, are happening at the elite universities that were the ones that were, named in these lawsuits that were fighting to maintain their diversity admissions policies under the idea that that was going to give them a diverse student body. And to have a diverse student body, then might be a diverse student body might be that you'd have, half in each political party. That's not the case.
Right.
And so I think if they want to achieve the goals that they were trying to achieve, there's plenty of ways they can do it. As far as service academies, that's an interesting exemption that they have, but
Does it make sense? I mean, it seems like if you believe in the 14th Amendment, it seems like the exemption doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it may not. But again, I think this is one of these situations where you'd say, what's the goal? What problem are you trying to solve? And from a military standpoint, military readiness. I mean, the biggest issue we have is we've got so many kids coming out of high school today that can't pass a military exam. They can't pass it physically, and they can't pass it academically. And so in North Dakota, one of the things we're doing at K-12 is we call it choice ready. When you graduate from high school, it's not just about, hey, can I go to a four-year college? Am I ready to go to college if I want to? Am I ready to get a career or technical education, which today can be a higher paying, lower debt option? And the third one is, are you military? Can you be choice ready to join the military? Because if we don't have pride, part of the pride in our country and part of what we do when I think about, folks in my dad's generation, the World War II generation, is where if we can't maintain a respect for people that want to go into law enforcement, that want to go into the military, these institutions that have protected our freedoms, for almost the last 250 years, if young people don't want to go into those institutions, we got bigger problems.
How would you select a Supreme Court nominee? Would you have any litmus tests?
I have had an incredible opportunity as governor to appoint judges. Somehow through the fate of baby boomers retiring, I'm the 33rd governor of North Dakota. I just yesterday was working through the decision process for my 18th judge appointment, two of those at the North Dakota Supreme Court, the others at district judges. And we don't have litmus tests. We try to find the people that are most qualified to do the job. And I think that, again, if there is any kind of litmus test, it's are they going to follow the Constitution and follow the law and not legislate from the bench? I mean,
do you care what the Federalist Society thinks of a nominee? Are you going to? Donald Trump outsourced all of his Supreme Court nominees to the Federalist Society. If they didn't have their stamp of approval, is that important to you?
Like I said, I have interviewed thousands and thousands of people in my life for jobs. I think that the process of selecting people for a job also depends on the team as well as the individual. And this is, who wins the Super Bowl? People that win the Super Bowl are people that have the right team on the field. And if that opportunity comes forward, that's one of the biggest responsibilities of the president. But I think my track record of picking people of high character, high integrity, every company I've ever been involved with, I've been surrounded by people of exceptional talent, exceptional commitment, exceptional character. I don't think that's going to change. And whether it's in the administration, whether it's cabinet leaders, or whether it's appointing federal judges at any level, that's not going to change.
How would you, if the Chief Justice John Roberts came to you and said, hey, we have a perception problem with ethics in the Supreme Court, you have any advice that you would give him? How would you improve the perception of the Supreme Court right now as an institution?
Well, it's interesting that Democrats think that there's a problem in the Supreme Court. In Congress, or in the DOJ or FBI, Republicans think there's a problem there. All of our institutions that are the foundations of democracy, if we don't set these on a different track where we actually build trust across all citizens, across all of these institutions, what's the option?
How would you do it?
What's the option?
How do you rebuild trust?
Well, Congress passes Sarbanes-Oxley and says, hey, we're going to show people in business what it means to have, high ethical standards. And then none of the rules that they put on corporate officers about insider trading apply to anybody in Congress. And so whether it's any branch of government, whether it's executive branch, whether it's the Congress or whether it's the Supreme Court, yes, we have to have ethics rules, and they have to be enforced where you can, for the public.
So there should be a more stricter, you'd like to see a stricter ethics code for Supreme Court justices?
I'd like to see it for Congress. I'd like to see it for Supreme Court.
But it's same across the board for every federal political appointee or elected political official?
Doesn't matter what branch you're in. If we've lost the trust of the American people, then how do you govern? What's the future of this country? And people should be going into government because it's service, not because it's a way to somehow financially enrich yourself. If you want to do that, we have 11 million jobs open in the private sector. It's America. It's capitalism. Go to work in the private sector. But the shift of power. I mean, if you go back in World War II, the highest GDP city in the nation was Detroit. It was manufacturing center. Then it shifted to Silicon Valley. Now some of the highest GDP counties in America, Washington D.C. and the suburbs. The amount of financial gain that can be made, that's where the average citizen who's working to pay their bills, the ones that we talk to when we're out on the campaign trail, that's where they see is it's not just corruption, whatever, it's the soft corruption of why are people that run for office getting so rich. That's the thing they don't understand. And again, that erosion of trust is a real crisis for our country.
You talked about you'd be open to some form of, is it age limits or term limits in government? What would you like to see on the judiciary? Age limits? Or tenure served?
Well, I think that tenure, and maybe it's a combination of tenure and age. Some corporate boards have adopted these approaches, and once in a while you get it wrong, and you've got somebody that is got their full capabilities, and they still could keep on going, and they get cut off because they run into a limit. But on the other side, it maybe provides some protections, and it could be something that again where people have help regain that trust because they say, hey, we're making sure that the people that are in these jobs can actually have the skills and the competency to be able to conduct them.
Is there one thing President Biden has done that you think has been a good thing?
Well, I'm struggling there because, again, as a governor, what I've seen in terms of the overreach of the federal government is, and my heart goes out. I mean,
I thought you might say the infrastructure bill, since there was support in your own state.
Well, I mean, and I could okay.
But I don't know whether you ascribe that to him. It doesn't sound like you do.
Initially, I'm like, hey, as a person that spent time in software, and we had a tremendous dependence on foreign manufacturers for chips. The CHIPS Act started out like a great idea, and people said, and as governor, I'd say, hey, I never comment on a bill till it's on my desk in its final form. And people said, wow, we're going to try to get onshoring for critical aspects of what we need, for communications, for transportation, for military equipment. That made a bunch of sense. Well, then you pile a bunch of ideology on top of that and say, well, you can get these dollars to help onshore here, but you've got to use union, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and you pile your ideology on. In North Dakota, we had a water project as part of that infrastructure bill, and we're excited. We have an opportunity. We've been trying to get this thing completed for decades. I mean, this is these federal projects that get held up over and over and over again. So finally, we're going to get it done. It's a $35 million pumping station to move water out of the Missouri River. We get the bids back, and it's $65 million. And I'm like, how is that possible? I mean, I know on the road side, we were getting bids back that were 20 and 30% higher, not 5%. I mean, real inflation. But as a state government, we don't say, hey, we're not going to build the road. It doesn't pencil out. We just build 70 miles of road instead of 100 when we have inflation. But on that water plant, I said, that doesn't make any sense. That's like double the price. Well, it turns out because of elements of Biden red tape regulation, we couldn't buy, from foreign entities. We couldn't buy a precision pump from Germany. We couldn't buy some stuff from Canada. Well, then, you got to buy it from an American company. They don't make it. And it's not going to be available for 4 years. So double the price 4 years out.
But you're excited about insourcing, but then you can't. I mean, if you want to have long-term, you want to have insourcing, how do you not support long-term insourcing with short-term insourcing.
Well, I support it, but I don't support it with saying it can only be made by members that are in a union. I mean, because there's plenty of people in this country that want to work for a good wage that don't feel like they want to pay a union dues. So that's I just think that the red tape, the ideology that gets in the way of actually driving the economy forward.
Two more policy questions. Xi, we've talked about China a little bit. Is he a dictator?
Absolutely.
So you agree with President Biden on that one? He called him a dictator, and China got offended by this. How would you have handled that moment?
Well, I'd call him a brutal dictator. I mean, look at their the rights record that they have. So that's a.
And where do you put Vladimir Putin?
I think he's running a large criminal organization, and I think we're seeing the tip of that with the Wagner Group. I mean, it's like we can't think of Russia today under Putin like a country.
You see it almost more as like a mob.
Well, absolutely.
A criminal syndicate works.
Well, the Wagner Group was operating, 65 shell companies all over the world. I mean, they control gold mines in the Central African Republic. When they're down helping out in Syria, there's contracts where they took over 25% of the oil production in Syria. That's a large criminal organization.
Right. So, in President Burgum administration, does Ukraine support change?
Well, we have to win the war. In Ukraine. I mean, period. We have to do that. And it's unfortunate that we're even in this spot. I've said many times before I even announced, we wouldn't be in this spot if we hadn't allowed our allies, and think about all the Americans. We talked earlier, we've both been to Normandy. Think about all the Americans that died fighting in World War II. And then we adopted a policy where we're trying to shut down the U.S. energy policy, shut down the U.S. energy industry so that all of Western Europe can be dependent on Russia for their oil and gas. That's what allowed, that gave him...
It's quite the dotted line. You think our shutting down our energy industry pushed Europe towards Russia?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they were completely dependent on Russian oil and gas. I mean, German manufacturing is off 25%.
They made a choice to be dependent on Russia. I mean, the idea that they had no choice, they made a choice, Germany did.
Right, but we had up until till just recently, we had an oil export ban. We've still got the Jones Act. We have a bunch of red tape and regulation that's completely outdated. If you care about the environment, you should want every drop of energy produced in the United States. We produce it cleaner, safer than anyone else. When Catherine and I and a group, we were in Japan in October for a trade mission, because you got 126 million people, our ally, living on a space the size of North and South Dakota, and while we were there, North Koreans shot a missile over the top of the island. What were we talking about? Why is North Dakota there? Well, we help feed and fuel the world like much of the Midwest does, and they have zero oil and gas production. Well, they're completely threatened by the fact that now China has the world's largest navy. All their oil and gas comes from Indonesia or the Middle East, because we can't get a pipeline permitted in America to get Permian or Bakken gas or oil, LNG, to the West Coast. You can't get a pipeline built in California, Oregon, or Washington. Japan would buy the next 20 years of LNG from us, and then they're there, and they feel like they're going to get cut off, just like that's how we beat them in World War II. We sank all their oil tankers. Right. So do you know what Japan is doing right now, post their nuclear Fukushima thing? They're stockpiling Australian coal on the ground. So we're not solving any environmental problems when we stop supplying the cleanest energy in the world to our allies, both in the Pacific and in Western Europe.
Governor Burgum, I have more questions, but I don't have more time. Thanks for your time.
Chuck, thank you for being here.
All right, my friend. Thank you. So it's interesting to me that you're essentially a former tech CEO, and in a Republican Party that's pretty anti-tech these days. You think your Microsoft credentials are an asset or a liability?
Well, I think my 30 years in technology, starting out as a teeny small business and then growing that into a global company, I understand what all entrepreneurs go through. I understand what it's like to cut your own pay or not take a salary so you can make sure you pay your own team members. So that's a huge asset, because I understand. And then who we served in that business, we were serving small businesses literally around the world. 132 countries we had customers. We had our business partners were small businesses. So I really understand what everybody went through. And now we have technology changing every job, every company, and every industry. But it hasn't changed much yet the government. And one of the things that I learned at stepping into directly from the private sector into running a state was we cut $1.7 billion out of a $6 billion general fund budget, and all the trains kept running on time. There's so much inefficiency in the way we deliver actual services, and and everyone's like, oh, do we increase spending or do we cut taxes? I mean, part of it, let's just actually run it better, cheaper, faster.
The world of tech is always very pro-immigration, right? Pro meaning you got to get more engineers, you need more people here. You talk about the inflation issue. Part of that is we need more workers. We have a labor shortage, and you just talked about the 11 million jobs. We have a labor shortage in this country. Our border policy is very polarizing.
Yes.
Right. We've just ascribed politics to it, which means we have. How do you break that?
Well, this is one thing that I put under the category of national security is actually border security. This is one of the limited roles defined in the Constitution that's not delegated to the states, and the federal government has to do it. I mean, one of the campaign statements I've made is, it took Biden 2 years to get to the border. I'll get down there in 2 weeks. We've sent North Dakota National Guard troops down to help. I don't think we can have an honest discussion, a reasonable discussion, find a solution about immigration in our country until we actually secure the border.
Nobody has a definition of what a secure border is, though. One person's definition of a secure border is another person's definition of how you stop commerce, right? There is a fine line here. You talk to people who live in South Texas, and these, quote, border closure issues are an economic threat.
Right. Well, I think a definition of a border that works is one of the longest state borders with a foreign country is North Dakota. We have 18 border crossings. We have commerce going back and forth across energy and agriculture. We have people that go back and forth, every day with, trucking. We've got pipelines to cross that border.
Should that be the way our southern border works?
Would be great. It'd be great if it did.
Or should we have a wall?
Do you see anybody up here that is, complaining about how it works? But now it's affecting us because the federal government, I was down at the border, the Customs and Border Patrol, they're so demoralized. They don't feel supported by the administration. Anybody who's of any age that's retiring is, and part of the reason we're sending North Dakota National Guard troops down is to just help with the capacity to stop people from literally just walking over.
Is the issue a wall, or is it more resources to deal with asylum claims?
Well, I think it's all of the above, and it would have to be a coming together because, again, if you build a wall, you can still fly an ultralight over the top of the wall and drop a bag of drugs on the other side. But there are ways with technology and innovation where you can understand, in talking to somebody, you can understand the difference between a cow-calf pair walking on a ranch, versus a group of human trafficking coming. So America is smart enough to figure out how to do this. We just have to have everybody come together. And you talked about high tech, because when we get the border closed, then we can have a discussion about immigration at all levels. And high-skilled immigration is another place where we get low grade. For the last 30 years, there's only been about 55,000 H-1B visas, and big tech sucks all those up on day one. And we had a small software company in Fargo.
You couldn't get those folks.
Well, we had 2 young women working on their master's degree from North Dakota State that wanted to stay and work here. And January 2nd, all the visas are gone for that entire year. Well, then we send them back to India when they're no longer a student, their student visa's out, and then they start a company back there versus working here for an American company.
The role you talked about in our interview and our sit down about how social media companies with the bots and all of this stuff. Is there a role for government in social media companies that government hasn't figured out yet?
Well, I think there's some disturbing news lately that you had government intervention in actually suppressing free speech. That's not the role for government.
Do you think that actually happened, or do you think that was decisions that Twitter made and that's Twitter's decision?
I think it's clear now that there may have been collaboration between the two, and the social media companies and others have essentially admitted that they've suppressed certain stories. So I think that, again, erodes the trust. But we have to have free speech in our country.
Is social media, though, a public utility? Or they're a private company? Can't they do what they want to do?
That would be my view. As long as the government isn't telling them what to do or telling them run this story or that story, social media can do that.
Should government warn a social media company if there's misinformation circulating around the globe?
Since the days of printing flyers in Benjamin Franklin's era, there has been misinformation printed and distributed. I think that's not a new problem. It may move faster, it may reach more people, but part of what we have to do is make sure that we create opportunities for the private sector and for public leaders to make sure that we're getting the information to people so they can make the right decisions.
You think social media is a valuable tool or not? You seem to be the way you brought it up to me earlier made you think you thought social media has been more of a negative.
Well, I think it can provide a valuable service, and of course, every state agency and every company can do better things because of it. It's as they say, everything is a tool, but it can also be a weapon if it's misused. Yeah. And I think that it's important right now for every citizen to understand that if you've got advertising-driven model, they'll make more money if they get more clicks. They're monetizing your eyeballs, and if you're getting angry and you're clicking on something, you're supporting a business model, and you may or may not be getting real information. But it's same for the cable and TV too. The more controversy, the more people watch. So you understand that.
I do, and been fighting against that tide for a while and losing. Elon Musk, is he somebody you're comfortable doing business with?
Yes.
Yeah. What's the difference between Musk and Trump?
Well, I think that there's a long, just look at business track records is what I would say, and that's what I would take a peek at before I would make a decision about who you partner with.
Governor, this weather's pretty good. Did you play a role in that too?
No, I can't take any credit for that. But I mean, what you're seeing in downtown Fargo, where we've got part of the focus we have is Main Street initiatives.
Do you like being known as the godfather of modern Fargo?
I haven't heard that term before, but we certainly understood that when we were here and we were trying to recruit talent and capital to come to North Dakota,
you had to make it a good place.
You have to
live.
make a place where young people want to live, where everybody can feel comfortable, and where diversity can thrive, where retailers can have local options that aren't available, either on the internet or through a drive-through type thing.
Right.
So anyway, getting the hyper-local activity, getting people engaged, getting a walkable, safe, vibrant community, it's important to our largest employer is the hospital. If they want to recruit doctors, they show them downtown. You want to get university professors here, you show them downtown. You want to get someone to come to work
your state legislature here?
Well,
to learn what this does for the state?
Well, we did have a cabinet offsite across the street here this year when the legislature closed, because we wanted to make sure that everybody understood the impact this can have. And across our state, we've now got close to 60 communities in North Dakota as part of our Main Street initiative. And so we've got great things like this happening across the state, from very small communities to Fargo, which is our largest metro.
Governor, you've been very generous with your time.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chuck.
it. Be safe on the trail.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.